And thank you for recording it, Michael, and thank you as always for being our Zoom tech. Looks like we have one resident here, Larry. Thank you for attending. And two council members, Katie and Arthur. Thank you both for attending. So welcome to everyone. The committee's main duties and timetable haven't changed. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, we're well on the way here to finishing the second item, which is reviewing the rules and procedures and having a final document to present at the council meeting prior to the council meeting in December. And I just want to thank everybody. There's a lot of hard work went into thinking this all through and combining it from 5 documents to one and updating it so that it doesn't have the 2023 dates, but is more of a standalone permanent thing like Naomi was just saying. Okay, first item of a business, unless there's anything about our duties that people want to ask about. Okay, approve the minutes. And again, many thanks to Jen for doing them. I actually had 2 minor changes to suggest in the minutes that I didn't catch earlier. If anyone else has suggestions, obviously speak up. Under the forum procedure on the first page of the minutes, in the third line or second line, I think I missed a typo there. It said John asked whether the village attorney had any concerns about the committee having discretion to revise some elements of the forum. That word should be concerns. Okay. We approve that amendment to the minutes?
Yes.
Yep.
Any opposed? Okay,
No.
that one's done. The second minor change was under rules and procedures document in the second paragraph. In the second sentence of that paragraph, it says, Michael Stillman informed the group that no other VMA documents have versions in other language. We have talked about, do we need to translate this into Spanish or something, or another language? And then it says, citing the possibility, it should say, citing the possible language needs of caregivers and au pairs. So change the word possibility that to possible language needs of. All right, anyone opposed to that amendment?
No, that makes it much more clear.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, unless someone else has any other changes in the minutes, again, I thought Jen did a superb job here. And we need a motion to adopt the minutes.
I make the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Paul seconds. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good to go. And again, thank you, Jen, and John, thank you in advance for next week's or next time's meeting. Okay, minutes are approved. Are there any questions about the schedule for the next 2 meetings? We should set the second meeting out. The next one is on November 30th after Thanksgiving. And we probably actually need to have one in early December, just in case there are any loose ends before we actually send this document to the council. So can you all check the first week of December and see what you've got on your schedules? All right, so if you've got a meeting on Thursday, the 30th, I'm just thinking that maybe Wednesday, the 6th, December 6th, I'd like to give the document to the council that week. But again, we should just build in case we need to, do any last minute anything. December 6th work for people? That's a Wednesday.
That works for me.
That
That works for me.
should work for me too.
Paul?
Yes, I think so.
Jennifer?
It does. I know I have 1 or 2 commitments in December that I don't know the dates yet.
Mm-hmm.
That might force me to miss out, but I'll say yes because I don't have a conflict right now.
Okay, good.
Oh.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm good, Marty.
John's good too. I'm good. Katie, does that work for you as our esteemed liaison?
You said December 6th, Wednesday?
December 6th, Wednesday night, 7:45. All right.
That works for me.
Okay.
So
Then
is
we
that
have-
7:45?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, we need a motion.
Marty, can I clarify? Are you meeting on the November 30th still?
Yes, still meeting on the
So
30th.
that's a Thursday, and then you're meeting again the following Wednesday?
Correct, because we need to get this document to the council that week. And I think we need to build in at least a short meeting on the 6th, just in case there are any last loose ends that we need to deal
Okay,
with.
and just so you all are aware, I am recommending that we move the December council meeting a week up
To the
um,
14th.
to the 14th, correct? Because the 21st is normally scheduled is a couple days before Christmas. And so some people might not be able to make it. And then also there's not 30 days between that council meeting and the January council meeting, which is when we would need to actually pass the election ordinance. So
Thank you
probably should
very
just
much.
move up December.
That makes sense on all counts. Thank you very much. So we got a council meeting on the 14th and our wrap-up meeting for loose ends is on the 6th. So, okay, all in favor of scheduling a meeting on the 6th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, our next meeting is on November 30th and December 6th. Okay. Any residents' comments, questions, or suggestions? Larry, I'm looking at you. You're free to chime in anytime. We are a very participatory committee. We welcome community input. So
Yeah, I'm right, actually, because I didn't know anything about the last meeting. I've been looking at the ordinance thing. Is that what you're gonna do next?
yeah.
Okay.
And again, feel free to contribute. Arthur, the same is true for you. And Michael, of course, if there's anything that you think that we should focus on or that's not clear to you, I'm also inviting you to participate. This is a group project. So the next item is to review the second markup on the main rules and procedures document. And what I thought we should do there is walk through that sort of, paragraph by paragraph. And I'll go through, there are very few actual substantive changes in it. It got reorganized to be more logical and to take out a bunch of duplication because the 23 ordinance had the same thing repeated sometimes in 2 or even 3 places. So we're going to walk through that and that'll probably take a few minutes. Before we do that, I'd like to ask, can we actually jump to number C there and talk about the specifications for the proposed RFP job announcement? Because I think that's shorter and we can just go ahead and take care of that and then do the walkthrough on the main doc. Is that okay with everybody to do C first?
What page
Yeah.
is that?
Okay, so we're going to the draft of the specifications for the proposed RFP contractor job announcement to assist the committee with the task of verifying. I wrote up the specifications over the weekend and then Michael was kind enough to give us the RFP format this morning. So now we have both documents in here. And Larry, look for something that says in your packet that talks about RFP or draft RFP. It's toward the end of the packet, but the last 2 documents I think are about the RFP.
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, changes? The specifications doc I sent you first is a little bit more detailed, but basically it's the same information in both of them.
Marty, can you hear me, Marty?
Sure can.
I have a question. I understand why we need additional help for the elections and the voter rolls. Okay, understand that. But here we're sending out an RFP, perhaps for some temporary help, as opposed to using the Electotech for the voter registration, et cetera.
Yeah, my understanding, and Michael, you can check on this, I think you already looked at it, is that Electech, which does the mail vote assistance, does not do voter roll verification. Is that correct, Michael?
That's my understanding, but I don't know what exactly the request would be, so.
Okay. When you have a chance to look at the specs, Michael, if Electech would do it, that'd be great, but I don't think they do. I mean, my memory of talking to them even back in 2020 was that they really didn't get into that area of it. So they conduct, they'll set up your election, they'll run your election booths and machines, but or in our case, do the machine counting, but they don't do verification of voter rolls. And so, John, it's a good question. I mean, Michael, if you'll follow up and check, but I expect the answer is no. I think we're probably, as we said from our discussion last time, we're going to end up with an individual who's good at doing detailed spreadsheets and can follow the instructions we give them, meticulously to give us an accurate spreadsheet on our voter roll for this year. Any other questions about the specs? Katie, were they detailed enough for you? Did you think they meet the needs of the council for a detailed proposal?
I mean, I think this looks outstanding. I think it did a good job. I'm really impressed by the amount of time you all turn this around and put this together. And I think, yeah, I think it's detailed. I know Arthur is on, I don't, not to, call on Arthur, but, Arthur, did you have a chance to review this, in the agenda tonight? The RFP?
No, I have not seen the RFP, but I have to tell you, I have some questions about the whole need for doing this that have not been explained that well. So that will be the question, I think, at the council meeting that other council members will have.
Would
What
you
is the
like,
question, Arthur?
Why? Why do it? Why do it now? What's the point?
So we didn't think that the committee had the wherewithal to get it done. I think it's what we talked about last time.
Well, yeah, Paul, that's not the question of why have somebody else do it. The question is why have it done at all?
Well,
Why now? What's the point? What's different today than it has been for the last 5 years?
the difference is that, Larry, you want to address that?
yeah, I got a couple answers to it. Past, I don't know about the past 5 years, but the past 3 years, a lot of the work about the voter roll has not been done by an election committee. It's been done by the staff of the village. And that's one of the things that is not supposed to occur. There never has been a clear explanation that many people, myself included, are satisfied with, how we suddenly, out of nowhere, got over 100 new voters. And of course, that implies to me that either that particular time the work was done correctly, or the year before it wasn't done correctly. So the question is it is it an actual accurate voter roll? And bringing a specialist in to identify the procedures we should use and to confirm that this is valid makes a lot of sense to me. It's just like you would have a treasurer, you know, you'd get a CPA to check to see that things are being done right. It's not that anybody deliberately did anything wrong, but as far as I'm concerned, the voter roll has been a ping pong ball for 3 years.
I'd like to follow up on that by saying that when you have a new definition of qualified voters and a new definition of residents defining your voter roll, the normal practice is to either redo it from scratch or to do a very thorough, comprehensive review, because you're working with a new definition, 2 new definitions in our case, that the council adopted in September. And I agree with the new definitions. I think that they are actually, you know, correct and helpful. But some of the people on the voter roll who were non-resident owners who used to be able to vote correctly on the voter roll validly no longer are valid voters under the new definition. And just having a new definition of who's qualified to vote alone is generally grounds to redo your voter roll. Now, the committee decided at our last meeting, we didn't want to redo it from scratch. We thought that was unnecessary, that we need to just simply be very systematic about having somebody basically make sure that all the voters on the voter roll are correct. And, you know, for the reasons Larry raised, and also because we're working with 2 new definitions here. So Arthur, that's your pragmatic answer as to why this needs to be done very thoroughly this year. We also want to build community confidence that this voter roll is accurate going forward. This is for future committees as well as for 2024. So does that answer your question? Does that help?
Not fully. I have to tell you, quite frankly, it has the sense of a Stop the Steal campaign.
Not
That
at
there's
all.
something wrong, that there are dead voters out there or something else going on.
Well, that did happen in 2021, where we had a lot of ballots, enough to have affected the outcome of the election if the candidates themselves hadn't caught the mistakes. Again, the staff was assigned to do the voter roll verification and was unable to do it because they had tons of other things to do. So in 2021, we did have people who'd moved away voting. We had people getting duplicate ballots. And then, as Larry said, the abrupt jump from, what was it, 625 voters to 747 last year, people were like, that's like 50 new houses. Well, there weren't 50 new houses built. I think it was mostly young adults from what I could check running a cross check on the 22 and 23 voter rolls, it looked like mostly young adults being added in households. There was no house that added like 10 voters. There was nothing like that. But 122 new voters in a village with 625 voters is a 20% increase, which is extremely unusual. Again, I don't think anybody did anything wrong. There's no attribution of motive here at all. Simply that there's been community concern, and we have the new definitions. The new definitions alone are a reason to do a very thorough check on the voter roll this year.
And if I could just add, as Arthur, as a council colleague, I'm supportive of this committee's of this ask, because just for two reasons. I just think that they're just trying to establish the cleanest, most accurate voter roll at the end of the day. And there has been a voter jump. The numbers have been different from year to year, and I just look at it as sort of an audit and something that maybe we consider doing like every 5 years from time to time. I know it hasn't been done before, but I've been here all along with them as they've been discussing it, and so that's where I'm looking at it from, and that's why I'm supportive as a council member of.
Okay, well, I think when you come to the meeting on Thursday, be prepared to make your case and be clear about whether you're talking about a name-by-name review or a review of procedures.
It's a name-by-name review. It's the actual task of verifying that the voters are correct. That's what we're looking at. That's why it's a big job, 750 voters. In the proposal that we have in the packet tonight, I have a lot of management where I have to estimate jobs, and at 8 to 10 minutes per voter. Some voters might take 30 seconds, some might take 2 hours. So 8 to 10 minutes per voter, that's 100 to 125 hours to check the 750 voters on the current roll. And the committee did decide last time that we're going to be working from the last year's voter roll going forward, in keeping with sort of the 2023 procedures being our baseline for what we're doing this year. And so 750 voters at 8 to 10 minutes a voter is 100 to 125 hours, which is an awful lot to ask a volunteer committee to do, especially since we have full-time jobs on top of the rest of the election management stuff. So it's actually a bigger job than normal. If you have a really clean voter roll going forward, it'll be easier for future committees. I don't expect future committees necessarily to need this kind of assistance. But this year, we really do need to do a name-by-name verification. And that's a big job. So I will put together a packet with the committee's consent and approval tonight to send to you tomorrow, Arthur, which has some background information on what is actually entailed here and the various data sources that need to check. A couple of us have done a deep dive on the state voter roll maintenance regulations, which are quite particular about how you verify voters and the data sources that you're allowed to use. And it's really been an interesting process for me. I know a lot about elections, but I didn't know all the details about verifying voter roll. Now we learn them. And I think, getting a clean base for the future is really something that we all should be on board with. What I would like to ask the committee for is, yes, Larry? Mm-hmm.
Marty, I can't remember, maybe, is his name Dennis? It's the guy that's the head of the Montgomery County voter roll.
Boris, yeah.
Boris, right.
Exec director of the staff for the county.
Yes, okay. Now, I called him probably almost 3 months ago and talked to him. And the county is looking for a specialist to do it on their rolls because of the chaos of the pandemic and the fact that so many sources that were assumed to provide solid information don't necessarily do it. And so the county's looking at all their voter rolls. And in fact, Marty, doesn't he want to see what we have to say? Yes, because
when I talked to Boris last week,
everybody
he's a very patient man. He's been answering lots of my way down in the weeds technical questions about this. And he said that when we verify our voter roll and clean it up for this year, and really make sure we have a correct voter roll, that we should please share it with him because he needs to correct the county voter rolls, which are, way out of balance also, and out of date. And again, the pandemic had a lot to do with that. you had students moving back home, you had people who would have been, moving on, not moving on. Like I said, I think we have more young adults now on our voter roll than we used to. But, verifying it, Boris said, yes, please help him, because the county voter roll, he knows. And they're doing things that are much larger in scale, because they're sending out multiple postcards to people to say, please verify, does this person still live here? I mean, they've got a huge job. Our job is manageable with 125 hours. His job, he's got full-time staff working on it, because it's such a big problem with the county voter roll being out of date. And of course, that is one of the data sources that we've used historically to check ours. And
And,
it
and
really
that-
gets
a lot
down
of
to,
that,
go ahead.
Marty, a lot of that was based upon the assumption that the resources used were reliable. The
Right,
data,
and now they're not.
and it turns out they're not so reliable. And the question is, what procedures, et cetera, and the only way you can find that out is by discovery of individual members.
Correct. Checking each name, 750 names. And that's why I think that we need some staffing help on it. At our meeting last time, we said that probably an RFP would not produce a firm or a company that would do this, not in the time we have. We need to start this in January. But at the very least, we could get a staffer who has got some experience in doing detailed annotated spreadsheets to verify, line by line, each of these names. And, the committee will add new people, but we probably do have, like we did in 21, some people on that voter roll who are not in fact qualified voters. And with the new definition, which says that owners can no longer vote, I don't know how many owners we have, absent, non-resident owners we have on the voter roll now. Nobody does know that, because we've never kept track of who's a renter, who's an owner, who's an absentee owner, who's an occupant owner. We've never had any data on that at all. So it is a big project. I mean, my estimate is 100 to 125 hours of pretty diligent, detailed staff work. And what I would like to do is, if the committee would agree, let's think about a packet to put together to send to Arthur and the rest of the council prior to the council meeting. We've got the one-page specifications of what we need the person to do, sort of just the job specs that you all got over the weekend. We've got now, thanks to Michael's help this morning, giving us the format for the RFP, we actually have a draft RFP, which has much of the same information in it. And the other thing we have on this, Arthur, that might be helpful to you is, I don't know, a month or two ago, I wrote up, just for internal, for us, kind of cliff notes on voter roll verification, just to help everybody on the committee get up to speed on the process. And my proposal, if the committee agrees, is to send all three of those documents to all the council members tomorrow with a little cover email note saying, hi, here's the background and why we're making this proposal. Does that sound like a good packet, those three pieces? Should we send all three, or what do you think?
I think we should, and I'm hoping against hope that they'll be reviewed thoroughly by the council.
I mean, the
Any-
only thing I would add to that, Marty, is our draft verification and certification procedures, because kind of responding directly to stop the steal kind of a tone, what you have is a document that lays out in excruciating detail, maybe more than any of us thought we would have wanted going in, what the actual steps to be taken are to do the verification.
I think that's
Which the idea was to leave it in there to be transparent, so that the voters and the residents would know kind of all the factors that could come into play to make the determinations about status.
good idea, Jen. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank
Marty,
you. Yeah, John.
I'm raising my hand, Marty. The question
Okay.
is, it sounds like you're advocating that maybe we should really be starting this from scratch to identify the voters.
I think we kind of worked through that last time at our last meeting. And
I know, absolutely right, but I don't know. I'm sort of reading between the lines and hearing the conversations. Are we advocating as a committee to start from scratch?
no, sir. No, sir. The decision last time was that the committee will start with the 2023 voter roll with the 747 people on it, and the current village office list of residents from Michael, which is, Michael assures me, as clean as he can make it, and that's great, Michael. Thank you for that. And those are two of the document data sources that we would have our contractor use to try to verify. But no, I don't think anybody wants to go back to scratch. Remember last time Susan Kahn, I think, raised the point about, and you did too, Nomi, that if you tried to have everybody re-register, the response rate probably wouldn't be high enough in time to have an accurate voter roll. So that's not realistic. I think we start with the voter roll we have and just verify name by name.
Yeah.
Yes, Larry?
I mean, yeah, I thought the idea was this was to be an audit.
Yeah,
to-
yeah, to check every name.
And
check
and I'm
everything.
sorry, I'm way, I really am 80. I don't get half of the slang today. So what is stop the steal?
Arthur?
What, say, I missed the point of that comment. Say that again?
I'm sorry, I know I should know this, but I'm just not with it. So what is stop the steal? What
Oh,
is
stop the steal. That's the Trumpian claim that the election was stolen, that he was the winner. And that there are the dead voters, the non-existent voters, and so on, that led to his asserted loss.
Thank you. Is there any member of this committee, I'm just asking, do any of you feel that way?
Not at
No.
all. I was the one who got 2 ballots 2 years ago. And I went around the village to see if there was anybody who did not get any ballots, and there were quite a few people. So we do not have a clean ballot roll. We
I
just
don't
do
know
not.
who is stealing what? What is there to steal?
Naomi, that's an argument that there are too few people on the roll, not too many.
That's
It
right.
doesn't matter what the argument is. The point is, the list is not clean.
That's right. But again, is there any member here that sees or looks at stuff with sour grapes? Nobody here was running for election. So what's the stop the steal? That's just baloney.
The goal is accuracy, in my view,
Exactly.
at the end. And maybe we'll end up with 800 voters, but we'll be able to stand behind the list and feel happy that we made the effort to be meticulous.
And you'll get to know that the procedures we're using are appropriate. Wow. Because we don't even know that.
Mhm.
I think the stop the steal notion is quite cynical. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Arthur.
well, it is cynical. And my cynicism arose from the fact that you're very suspicious of the jump in the number of
No,
voters.
we're not. We are asking the question,
Mhm.
what is the difference and why?
Well,
And
let me
should
make a suggestion here that it's not a suggestion, it's an observation, that among the people who can vote are caregivers who are living in a residence, nannies who are living in a residence, that no good cousin who moved in and is sleeping on the sofa. Remember the old days used to say, show us an electric bill. Well, none of these people will have an electric bill. What they have is an assertion, which we call an affidavit, that yes, I am a resident here. And so this raises all kinds of questions about how you go out and verify all these different kinds of possible people who are residents and are qualified to vote.
It's a complicated process. It's a multi-step process. And you'll see that from the backup documents that we're going to send you, including the one Jen suggested about the draft voter verification process that would be officially adopted as part of the ordinance. It's a step-by-step. There's no one perfect way to verify a voter roll. You have to do cross-checks on various places because, for example, if the county voter roll were accurate, that's a big help, but we know it's not. So eventually what you do is you come down to checking people with all the different data sources that you have. And there are a handful of standard ones that the county and the state use and that we also have used in the past. And eventually you get down to hopefully not more than 40 voters, maybe 50 out of 750, where the committee actually needs to approach people directly, which we've done in the past when it wasn't clear. Literally back in 2019, which was the last time that I was able to do this with some thoroughness, we were, we had maybe, I think, 12 or 13 residents where we actually need to go and say, how many adults 18 and over are living here? And then check their driver's license or whatever they had that address on it to confirm that they were in fact residents and qualified to vote. This year, it's even more complicated because you may have, and probably do have, I don't know, some non-resident owners who could always vote under the old definition, but can't vote under the new. So they were perfectly legal last year, but this year they wouldn't be. And so that may require some further checking, like cross-checking the county property ownership records against the village residence records to see owner versus residents. Maybe we have an owner that doesn't live here. I know of at least one case on Thornapple where there are 3 people listed to vote, one of whom is an owner who has never lived here. And that's just because I happen to know the family, that I knew that was true. So that's at least one person who would be falling off the list under the new definition the council adopted. And that kind of detailed check just takes some time. So that's why we're asking for support, because we sized up the job and we thought, whoa, this is way more than we really can manage. And that is, I think, an accurate statement. The entire committee feels that way. I'm not speaking for myself here.
Marty, I have a question for Arthur. Arthur, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I really want to understand your concerns on the voter rolls. Maybe I missed it when you first had some issues about it. But now that you listened to our committee members here, what are your concerns at this time, or what would you take to the council?
Well, the council will hear for themselves, but my concerns are, I've heard it from other council members, is this is, oh, wait, hold on, there's a message coming, bang, there it's over. The concern is that this is a reaction to the sharp increase in the number of voters from the last election, and that there's a suspicion that something may be wrong there, that this looking into looking for some nefarious reason for that. Because why now? What's different this year from any other year? Why is it that you want to go off and do it now?
Let me actually answer that, Arthur. I actually think that the last year's 2023 voter roll is probably far more accurate than the 22 roll was. And that's a seat of the pants estimate just from comparing the 2 rolls and looking at who's been added. And it looks to me like last year's committee was indeed more thorough and more careful than was done in 2022. So I think what we've got here is probably a situation of no nefariousness, but an undercount. People were not signing up to vote or weren't counted, weren't included in 22. And I think probably the 23 number is closer to accurate. But we still need to check it because who knows, right? But my take is that last year's was actually probably closer to accurate. Larry, I see a hand up from you.
Yeah, another way to, I actually train and tell other licensed inspectors how to report and how to do their job. And I bring in my competitors to audit me to see that if I'm doing it right. Why? Because people make assumptions out of habit, and events and situations change. And those procedures, therefore, don't deal with things correctly. And that's one of the purpose of audits, to confirm that you are using reasonable methods and effective methods to do something. And to come to think of it, why would anybody assume that what we're doing now is correct? It's never been audited.
Good point.
John?
Yeah.
John, did you
Well, I
want to
just wanted to add that, oh, I'm sorry, John.
No, go ahead, Katie.
No, I just really want to emphasize the hard work of each member of this committee. And there's no, this is not a whodunit. This isn't like a gotcha thing. It's just, they're just trying to get the most accurate number. So we have the most, we're allowing the most residents to vote. This is not like trying to catch somebody or blame somebody or anything from a past election. This group is very thorough. They're very hardworking, and they're just trying to deliver the most accurate roll to the community. And I think that's their goal, and that's their service and their mission. And you did ask earlier if I had any questions or like feedback on the document itself. The only thing I might add, and Michael, you might have to correct me on this, just like on the submittal requirements, bullet point, maybe just on hourly rate. Should we request, can we request that? Maybe I missed it I might have missed it, but I wondered about just maybe adding that, because that's what we're also finding in this mission. But I just wanted to just thank you all for all your work on this. I just wanted to reemphasize that.
Thank you, Katie.
Whatever it's worth.
Everybody really put a lot of thought and discussion into how to approach this. And the committee has voted 5-0 that we need help to do this job. And I hope that won't be the same in the future. You know, we'll have good procedures, clear. I hope that this document that we're producing this year, the overall ordinance, which we'll have as an Appendix A, the voter verification procedures, will be like a cookbook, so that future committees can just follow the procedures step by step. But you know, part of our job is making sure that it is as good as we can make it. And I think that's a commitment everyone shares. So thank you, Katie. And thank you, Arthur, for really asking the questions about where this came from. I don't think, you know, I certainly don't think last year's voter roll was inaccurate. I think probably the year before was an undercount. So, you know, there's no criticism here. There is a need with a new definition of residents and a new definition of voters, qualified voters. There is a need to go through the entire list. And we'll put together the 4-part packet that I think that Jen's draft, from tonight's meeting on the voter roll procedures that would go in with the ordinance this year. The Cliff Notes from, 6 weeks ago, sort of a quick summary, plus the 2 documents tonight. So I would like to, unless there's more discussion, I'd like to ask for a committee vote to put those 4 pieces together and send them to the council with our proposal tomorrow, so they have time to look at it before the meeting. Does that make sense to folks? Paul?
Yeah. So,
Paul,
Yeah.
You want to move to do that, Paul, to compile that packet to send to the council tomorrow?
I think
I agree.
I
Okay.
second.
All
Yep.
right, so we've got Paul proposes, John and Nomi both seconded. Jen?
Yep.
Agreed?
In favor? Yep.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, no, any no's? I didn't hear any. Okay, I will put together those 4 documents and send them to you tomorrow, Arthur, along with everybody else on the council.
Okay, thank you.
And Katie, thank you for your support. That really means a lot, because you've been here working with us through this, every couple of weeks at our meetings, and we really appreciate you seeing the scope of the job and being willing to speak up for us. So thank you for that. All right, we have a committee
wanna
vote
say-
here.
I
Yep.
want to say something. I want to say, Marty, you have done so much work on this, so meticulously, so fervently, and I really appreciate the many hours that have gone into this. You have done yeoman's work. That's an understatement. So I appreciate it. The rest of us are just standing by and approving and reviewing, but you've done all the work. Thank
No,
you
I
so
haven't actually, but thank you for that very kind set of words there. That means a lot to me. No,
Yeah,
in fact, Paul and John.
You're the elections guru of our
Well,
village.
I have done some deep dives into the regs. That
You
took
are
some
the
time,
guru. Yeah,
but-
and I've gone back with you years and years ago, and I know what
Just
it's
accept the accolades, Marty, and move on.
I'll just say thank you graciously, but I want to encourage that every single person here has worked on at least one and usually several of these documents. Jen's
Okay.
work on this voter roll verification document is extraordinary. I mean, and your work on the forum procedure, and John and Paul both worked on the tasks for the contractor and the voting procedures. And I mean, everybody's done their share on this. So, but thank you very much. It has taken more time than I expected, but
yeah.
I think we're close to being done, and I'm very,
Yeah.
very happy that the way it's coming together now.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. The next thing we should do is the main thing tonight, which is to go through this. It's our second markup on the main rules and procedures document. And what we have before us tonight is a document where the various components that we approved before have now been consolidated together. At our very first meeting, we agreed that we would take the 5 different separate election documents we inherited and put it all in one place, make it in one consolidated ordinance. We also agreed that we would go through and make it kind of a long-term standard ordinance so that it'd be like a cookbook. People won't have to do this next year. It'll all be clear. So we went through and took out the 2023 dates that were all through these documents and made it into the standard language that people could just use. So next year's committee can just do a half page on what are the dates for the election components, and boom, start with the cookbook and start applying the procedures. So there's been a lot of staff work on this from all of you. And so what I thought we should do is just walk through and talk about, there are very few actual substantive changes from past practice in our draft document. So everybody's got it in front of you. This is called, I'm working off of what's called the clean copy of draft dated November 12th. Does everybody have that in front of you? Okay. Okay. The first change is in the formatting of it. We took it, the document that we'd approved last time, and basically put it into some logical order. There were places where multiple sections talked about the same thing. And basically what we did is we took it and just organized it in a clean, logical fashion. So it starts now with the election ordinance, starts with the purpose of this ordinance is fair and independent elections, and make sure all qualified voters are able to freely exercise their right to vote. The only change there is it used to say some boilerplate about free and fair elections, and now it says more specifically fair and independent elections. So no substantive change there. There was no substantive change in section Roman numeral 1 about the council election process. Those are 2 paragraphs there. The only thing that really changed there is you'll see the last sentence in the first paragraph where it says Charter Section 301 defines the qualified voters. That's new there. It used to be down in a footnote. And as I was going through trying to organize this rationally, it seemed to me that that was important enough that it belonged up in the text. You know, where's the definition of qualified voters? It's in section 301. Larry, did you have a question about that?
Not to be hope this doesn't make a problem.
Okay.
I read the 2 paragraphs, and I admit I have a short concentration span. But I just got confused back and forth because 1 minute there's a sentence about the council, the next minute it's followed by a comment about the committee, and then it jumps back to the council. And my suggestion is you take your first paragraph and lay out all the comments you want to make about the council and put everything about the committee in the second paragraph. And I think it will be much clearer as to the various roles and actions.
I have no objection to that. Does anybody else object to that?
Sounds like a good
Makes-
idea. Yeah.
Makes sense, flipping the 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
flipping them. You have to, they're all
I
minutes.
see I can see exactly how to do that, Larry. Let me just
Okay.
get a vote from the committee to go ahead and make the change Larry suggests, which is to put everything about the council in 1 paragraph and everything about the committee in the second paragraph.
Good idea. I vote for that. I move for that.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, will do. Then we get down to the general provisions. And the only change in the first one, number 1, is that the committee shall set the date of election day between May 1st and 15th. The charter actually says between March 1st and May 15th, but going back 20 years of being involved with VMA elections, we've always done it between May 1st and May 15th, which is consistent with what the charter says. It's not contrary to the charter, but it's more specific. And one of our goals here is to make this as clear and simple as possible for future committees. We always do it between May 1st and May 15th, so we thought general provision should say that. Anybody opposed to that change?
Yep.
So moved.
All in favor of that change, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good to go.
So
Then-
just copy editing, in number 1, you're starting with a comma. But-
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll fix that. Yeah, this does have
Yeah,
some cleanup that needs to be done.
yeah, absolutely. I understand, but I'm just
Yeah.
noting that.
Yeah, number 2, no change. Number 3, it says no later than 75 days prior to election day, the committee will open the nomination period. Again, that's what we've been doing for years now. The charter says no less than 60 days, so this is consistent with the charter. And again, to have it be a cookbook, right, 75 days is what we've been doing for years, and probably should say that right here, just to be clear going forward. Because you can't do a mail vote process unless you start 75 days in advance. That's just logistics. All in favor of that change, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Number 4, we simplified it. One of the issues that has come up repeatedly in the last couple of years in the election turmoil has been that there were confusing. There were two different dates. I mean, traditionally, there's only one date for candidate filing, and it's 45 days before election day. That's been the norm. But the last couple of years, there were two dates, a different nomination date, and then a week later, a file your paperwork date. And residents repeatedly said that was confusing. So we simplified it this year by saying one single filing date, and whether it's going back to the traditional practice, which is the norm in most places, single candidate filing date 45 days prior to election day. Is anyone questioned about that?
No, it
Okay,
makes
all in
sense to
favor?
me.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, John, do you have a question about that? Nope.
No.
Okay,
Good to
good to
go.
go. All right. Nothing in number 5, although, these have been rearranged a little bit to make them be more logical. This is same as last year. Publish the election information packet and mail it to the VMA households no later than 2 weeks after the filing date, because we want people to have that in good time. Then you go down, nothing in number 6, nothing change in number 7, nothing change in number 8. Number 9, there was one change in the first sentence of that. What the last year's reg said is that if there are 2 or more candidates with the same number of votes, the committee shall hold a runoff election within 2 weeks. And you can't hold a runoff election by mail within 2 weeks. It takes at least 3 and usually closer to 4 to do a mail vote election. So we've changed the word there from hold a runoff election within 2 weeks to initiate a runoff election, which, yeah, Larry?
Sorry, I want to go back to 5 if I could.
Okay,
I don't know if this matters, but it's like, is the responsibility to send this packet to each voter, because it's saying it sends it to the household.
traditionally, we sent one packet to each household.
Is that right?
Hmm.
Okay,
I think that was more to save paper and time and expense. The printer mails them out, so sending 750 packets as opposed to 330,
right.
is more efficient. Anybody on the committee think we ought to send it to individual voters?
One per household, one per household.
One per household, says Paul.
Makes
Everybody else
sense.
is-
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes
but
sense.
thank you for asking that.
Well, okay. There's some other ideas, but all right, sure.
Okay. Well, we will be taking, community comments throughout this process. So I just want to walk through the main changes tonight. All right. So we talk about initiating a runoff election within 2 weeks. And because they have to be held by mail. The other thing that I added in number 9, per our committee vote last time, we had a 5-0 vote, that we should note that that recount provision, I add a provision about recounts. This is not new in terms of substance. The state regs require recounts. This is just a simplified version of the state regs that says that that a losing candidate can request a recount here by notifying us no later than 3 calendar days after the results are announced. That is a simplified version. If you go to the state, it gets complicated. It's a percentage of the eligible voters and the people who actually did vote. It's a formula. It's simpler to just say, yes, we can do recounts in Martin's Additions. We've only done one that I know of, and it was in 2019 when the difference between the winning losing candidate was, I think, 3 or 4 votes. And the committee itself initiated a recount that same night. We recounted everything twice that same night. But the idea that a losing candidate can request a recount is actually standard. It was already in effect silently. It just wasn't in our regs. And because residents did ask questions about that the last couple of years, I thought it would be a good idea to just say a simple recount provision. So yes, anybody got questions about that? It's not a substantive change because that's what was already in effect. It just simplifies what the state regs would say. Everybody good? Can we have a vote on that? All in favor of number 9? please
Aye.
say-
Good.
Any opposed?
Good.
Okay. Number 10 is very similar. The state regulations require us to include referendum questions and have a whole complicated procedure about how the council can initiate a referendum, or you have to have 20% of your voters, your qualified voters, can sign a petition for a referendum. We don't need to include all of that. But again, this was an issue that came up repeatedly in the last couple of years with, I think, Nomi, you were one of the residents who asked at a council meeting, can we even do referendums on VMA elections? And the answer is yes, we can. So this just says that our elections can include referendums in accordance with Maryland law. Anyone opposed to that addition?
No, not at all. It's a good
All in-
addition.
All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I didn't hear any nays. All right, going down to qualified voters who can vote. The first paragraph there has the new language from the council in September 23 that we have to add here. Qualified voter is any natural person, it can't be a corporation, and that owners can no longer vote. And I think you're all familiar with the background papers we had about that. And then the new definition of residence is from Ron Bolt. It's directly Ron's language. The location deemed one primary residence or quote permanent abode according to the case law. And I did go back and read the case. And where one intends to return. The election law is really interesting in some ways. You know, to base like your voting right on whether you intend to return seems awfully subjective. And we as a committee, I mean, Arthur, this goes back to the paper I gave you, the memo back in August about how does the committee know what somebody's psychological intent is? Well, you need a piece of paper that says something like, you know, I intend to return. And we have that later in here, what they would say. So this is paragraph 1 is just the addition of the new language from the council. Paragraph 2, no change. Paragraph 3, no change. Paragraph 4, right, it's not numbered, but it's the one that starts residents who are temporarily deployed on military service. That goes to the issue, Arthur, that came up at the meeting where you were discussing the September definition change, where one resident said that he would lose his right to vote if non-resident owners can't vote. Well, when he's on a military deployment, he's a non-resident owner. And again, we check the state regs on that. And this reflects the state regs. Residents who are deployed on military service in other locations retain their residential right to vote on simply giving their local board of elections either that signed federal form or that assigned and dated declaration as it says there. So that's again just implementing the change that the council made. The same is true on the next paragraph that starts property ownership alone does not convey voting rights. That's the change the council made. And the way that Ron has written this, and the council has adopted it, the language, property owners who are temporarily residing elsewhere for work or other reasons can maintain their residential vote by providing the election committee with a federal form, which is a one-pager, or a signed and dated declaration. And the 7 years there in the last paragraph came about because Jen, who works for the Foreign Service, said that, you know, that the Foreign Service assignments can be 3 years, typically are. Is that right, Jen?
Yeah, the standard length is 3 years.
So somebody who went
So
back
if
to
you-
back. Go ahead.
No, I'm exactly right. If you go to back-to-back assignments, which that is a very common path, you're looking at least 6 years of being out. And so that's why I advocated that we increase the number of years from 5 to 7.
Made sense to me. And again, this is implementing the council's own new definition. So let's do a little quick vote on that. All in favor of paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the paragraph that starts property ownership alone, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
But I do have one question, Marty.
Sure.
How are renters? I know that there's a number of renters, not a number of renters in the village, you know. So, but if the one package is sent to the household, I mean, does that exclude the renters from voting?
No, renters can vote because they're residents under the first paragraph. Any natural person who's residing in Martin's Additions. So renters can vote. And I think that if typically what we have is somebody like Jen, you know, maybe rent out her house for 3 years while she's in Germany.
Well-
But renters can vote. It's absolutely clear. And you get
Well,
later. Go ahead.
I'm referring to, say, somebody in the granny suite or something, you know, living in the basement, you know.
You know, that's something that we should check when we do the voter roll verification process, that there may be more than 2 households at one address.
Yes,
That's a really interesting question, and we'll need to have, hopefully, our skilled staffer basically look for that, because I hadn't thought about that before. I don't know if that, yeah,
I mean, I think there's a couple places on Taylor Street that are renting the granny suites out or whatever, you know. But there may be more throughout the village. I don't know, quite honestly, what the number would be. I have no idea, frankly. Maybe Larry Watson would know. Larry's got a good handle on that.
Yeah,
Larry, what-
I know for a fact that the village office is renting out a closet to a guy for 400 a month.
Michael, say it ain't so. If you need a raise, ask the council. Don't rent out the closet. But you know, John, that's a really good point, and that's something we should put in when we get back to the overall voter verification process that Jen did the draft of that we can look at tonight. Which is like, yeah, there might be two households now. And it's not anywhere addressed in previous documents here. Wasn't addressed last year, but it's certainly something we need to consider here. So yeah, good point. Anyone else got anything on that paragraph? Okay,
With
I made
that
a
in-
note to include that. Yeah.
With that in mind, I want to go back to 5. You don't have
Okay.
to scroll back, but we do something I just remembered that isn't mentioned here that would also help make this more equitable, and that would be maybe some statement in there that you would post on the website.
Here in such cold-blooded terms that the boss.
Say again, that we post on the website?
Yeah, the committee shall publish, right, the official election information packet to all households, but I think also we should put it on the website.
We do. That is covered earlier.
But
That is,
so
that
that's
is covered.
stated in here?
Yes, it is, sir. Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, all right.
I promise you that's covered. We'll also be doing a lot of updates and standalone, you know, on Constant Contact and in the weekly wrap-ups. You know, getting the word out to people, you know, if you're not sure if you're registered to vote, here's, you know, part of this. And when you get to the voter verification process, one of the things we're planning to do, I at least assume it's proposing to do, is to also involve the street captains in helping us to, you know, contact everybody, basically, so that we can, you know, really make this a community effort to help update the voter roll. And you know, this is going to be very well publicized, that we really want to be inclusive, that we're voter friendly, and that we want everybody to be able to vote in Martin's Edition who's legally able to. You know, we want 100% voter turnout at our elections if we could. Okay. So I made a note of that, and I promise you we will do all kinds of communications. Next paragraph, the committee shall develop, verify, and certify the voter roll in accordance with the voter roll verification procedure in Appendix A. And that's the second document we'll review, the one that Jen did such a noble job on, man, pulling that together. And then the second sentence there, you shall utilize the most recent available electronic contact. That's all from last year. The new voters, it's all from last year. The only change in the next paragraph, the one that begins new voters may contact, is that it had said some somewhat vague language last year about new voters should be prepared to show. And we thought we should clarify that to say a new voter must show a driver's license or some other documentation. And that goes back again to the state regs that you have to have some kind of documentation if you're adding somebody to a voter roll. So it shouldn't be iffy. It's just clear. Anybody got any reason not to approve those two paragraphs? The committee shall develop and the new voters may contact.
I would think so.
Okay, let's have a vote on those two. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, good to go. Last paragraph there has one new piece in it, although it was implied last year. This just makes it clear. The committee is responsible for verifying and adding new voters and is likewise responsible for removing from the voter roll the names of those who are no longer qualified voters in accordance with the process specified in the voter roll verification procedure. The actual ordinance didn't have that language, but the voter verification procedure, which used to be a separate document, did. And the next sentence in there, they shall confirm that the verified voter roll is used in operating the election, is exactly the same as last year. So are we good on that paragraph? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're rolling through this. Procedure for voting. This is again pretty much straight out of last year. I've marked, is there any change here in terms of content? No, things got rearranged, but it's exactly the same content. Yep, this is all language from last year. All right, so procedure for voting, going down to the bottom of it. Okay. All right. Can we just vote on that entire section? Since there's no change from last year there? All
Yeah,
in favor?
aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we'll pass. Katie, we did include one thing that you had recommended in that, in the very last paragraph under that section. Says all completed ballot envelopes must be received by the mail vote contractor no later than 5 p.m. on the day of the vote counting session. Do you remember last year you proposed, there were 4 votes that came in, 4 ballots that came in, not votes, but 4 ballots that were disqualified last year because the vote counting session was the day after the ballot due date. But they were in hand, and I think you were correct at the time. Do you remember objecting and saying they ought to be counted because they're right here to be more inclusive and voter friendly?
Yes, because they hadn't started the actual count yet, and I figured.
Exactly. Well, what this
Yeah.
does is it just says that, you know, they have to be there on the day of the vote counting, right? So if they're on hand with the vote counting, they're counted, which is more voter friendly. So that's not really a huge change, but it would have, if it had been in effect last year, prevented 4 people from being stopped from voting. And we do want more inclusive elections. So let's vote on that specifically. The last paragraph here, which says that all completed ballot envelopes must be received no later than 5 p.m. on the day of the vote counting session. All in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposed, that passes. Okay. I'm trying to roll through this fast. Candidate nominations and filing process. The only substantive change there was that we simplified it, so there's just one date. The candidate filing is 45 days before election day, and we already approved that. And then if you go down to the middle of the second paragraph, it talks about a brief candidate statement of up to 1,000 words. Last year's reg said 700. And the reason to include it to 1,000 is twofold. One is you want to respect the candidate's free speech rights. And we have, prior to the previous 3 years before that, we used to allow, 1,000-word candidate statements. Katie, I remember one year you went and gave us one that was 2.5 pages, which was like 1,500 words. And, we just printed it. Nobody argued about that. So anyway, the change there is in the middle of that second paragraph of that candidate statement of up to 1,000 words. Does anyone think it should still be 700? Are you okay with changing it to 1,000?
I don't have any problem.
Anybody else?
Good to go.
All right, let's have a vote on that. All in favor of saying it can be up to 1,000 words, please say aye.
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 I got an aye from Jen.
Yeah.
Aye.
John.
Yeah, aye. Yep.
Nomi. I think Nomi's off for the moment, but anyway, we got 4 out of 5. So
Yes.
yeah,
I'm
5 out of
yeah.
5. Okay, 5-0 on that. And again, I think it's kind of a free speech issue. 1,000 words is not too much. No big deal to publish it. Everything else in that section is basically the same as last year. So let's vote to approve this, all of section 5. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, good to go. Candidate announcements, announcing the candidates. That's basically the same as last year. Let's have a vote on that. All in favor, so say aye.
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 And another aye from here. Any opposed? No. Okay, 5-0. Election forum. Nomi, this is the piece that you worked on. I thought you did a nice job of it. What this says is basically it has 3 short paragraphs, and then it refers to Appendix B, which is the actual forum procedure. And last year, the forum procedure was not in any writing that we had. We were unable to get a copy of, if they had a written forum procedure that they filed last year, we didn't receive it. But we had forum procedures from previous committees. And so the committee did a markup to do that. And that is attached here as attachment B at the very end of your document. We voted to approve this procedure, I think 2 meetings ago. And what I did here was just simply attach it as Appendix B. And I made it an appendix because it was sort of long and kind of disrupted the flow of the text in the main part of the ordinance. And so we've got Appendix A now, which will be the voter verification procedure, and Appendix B with the forum procedure as 2 appendices. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the language in section 7, the election forum, is basically straight from last year, except that it now refers to Appendix B. The requirement there that from last year that was really the stress the council had was to emphasize that it has to be an impartial forum. And the language about the impartiality is now, it says here that it has to be impartial, but it also says very clearly in the Appendix B that the election forum shall be strictly impartial, must cover a broad range of issues, exactly the language from last year. Okay? So there's no change of substance here. It's just now Appendix B. And it's in writing this year, which it wasn't last year. So that's good. All right.
Yes,
Okay, can we vote on section 7, election form? All in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Aye, aye,
Opposed? No opposed, 5-0. Okay. Election service contractor, and again, thank you, John and Paul, for your work on this. There's no change in the substance of any of this, although the wording got cleaned up a little bit from last year. The mailing date for the ballot packets and final received by date for the completed ballots. Again, this is this goes to the contractor for their instructions. Just says again, Katie, about the completed ballots must be received at the contractor's PO box by 5 p.m. on the date of the vote counting. So that's just, picking up here in instructions to the contractor, the same change we approved a few minutes ago. And the one sentence there about instructing the contractor to mail early ballot packets to voters, that was in last year's regs in a somewhat more vague form. And we just said that the committee will do that. Basically, may instruct them to do that. We've had a couple of voters in previous years who were like in Italy, I think, for when the mailing was happening, and asked for early ballots, and the past committees did that. The specifications for the packet and equipment on election day, no change from last year on any of that. And the subsequent voter roll changes, again, is just a clearer, somewhat shorter version of what they had last year, exactly the same content. So should we do a vote on section 8, instructions for the election service contractor?
aye, yes,
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
aye,
Any opposed? Okay, 5-0 to approve that. Vote counting procedure. And I think this is the one that you worked on, Paul. Basically, it's the same as last year.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it. I don't see any changes here that I marked. Looks to me almost pretty much identical. Oh, there is one change at the end. We go down to see where additional instructions is underlined at the end of that section. The committee is authorized to specify additional instructions for the contractor as necessary to ensure a fair and accurate election. You see that sentence?
Yeah.
I thought we should probably include a fair, inclusive, and accurate election. Is that anything that gives anybody heartburn?
I'd support that, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, that's the only change that I have of any substance whatsoever in this section. So let's again do a vote on the section. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
aye,
Any opposed? Okay, good to go, 5-0. Next section, election interference, I would actually like to make a change in. Again, this is something that's been in effect forever, right? We're just now putting it into the ordinance to make it clear to people that this is part of the package. The Code of Elections for the state prohibits interference with election officials in the performance of their official duties. That's the language from the statute. I think we should strike the sentence that says VMA council members and staff shall not alter or delay election notices, issue ballots, be involved in the vote counting process, or otherwise interfere. I mean, that's a true sentence. That's exactly right. But we had one council member who in March of this year said at a public meeting that she had altered an election notice. And I do recall that happening because the committee at the time documented it and objected to it. But I don't think we should poke anybody with a stick here. I think that election interference section would read just fine if the other two sentences stood alone. The Maryland Code of Election Law prohibits interference with election officials in the performance of their official duties. The committee shall document any interference and promptly report it to the council. So I would propose to strike the middle sentence of those three. What do you think, Paul?
I don't have any problem with that. If you feel that's okay, yeah.
I just don't want to rock the boat here, by hitting somebody on their sensitivities. Jen, do you have a thought on that?
No, I mean, I don't feel strongly. I mean, I don't have a sense for what people's sensitivities are, although I guess tonight I probably got a taste of it. But so I wouldn't object to removing it.
Okay. Anyone else on that? Katie, do you have a thought on that?
Nope. Fine.
Okay.
That's
Well,
good.
let's have a committee vote to strike the second of the three sentences under section 10, election interference. All in favor of striking that sentence, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, 5-0, we strike that sentence and leave the rest of the paragraph. Records is unchanged from last year. Electioneering is unchanged from last year. Let's wrap this up by doing both of those together. All in favor of maintaining the language from last year in number 11, records, and number 12, electioneering, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. All right, then we get down to Appendix B, the election form procedure. And the only thing that's different from what we had as a draft to work from in number 1 is that we decided our last meeting or the meeting before that the committee could hold a second forum if the candidates wanted to. And so the last line of paragraph 1 there, it says the committee may hold more than one forum after April 15th. Right? We voted to do that. It's just in here.
Yeah.
We don't have to. We're allowed to. Paul, I'm going to make you be the forum moderator. You'd be an excellent forum moderator.
I wouldn't oppose it, but I'm not sure it's necessary, but I wouldn't oppose it. But
Well, we did have 2 forums one year because the first one didn't get recorded, so we had to do a second one. So it's clearly doable, it's workable. And, my take on this stuff is that, more information for voters is better than less. So if the candidates want to do a second forum, we as a committee could decide at the time, but I'd be in favor of doing that. Okay. And as I said, we already voted to allow that, so we don't really need to vote here separately. The other question I had for you, it says during the second half of April in the first sentence there, and I think we should say between April 15th and 30th, just to make it clear. No change in substance, but putting the dates in April 30 and April 30th. Okay, and let's see if there's anything else on that. Nothing else changed there in that whole section from what we approved before. If you look at the end of paragraph 5 there, the foreign structure, we put in the language that we had voted to do last time. It says the election committee may revise these format and timing elements, the specific ones in number 5, at its discretion, provided that all candidates shall have equal time to respond to each question. Right, that was the language we came up with last time. You'll see in paragraph number 2, the thing about strictly impartial, and that language again is straight out of the ordinance from last year. So does anyone want to discuss any of the specific elements here? Nomi, this was your lead on this document. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, I actually think it belongs here and it's not controversial. So I would vote for inserting it.
Okay, anybody else comments? Okay, all in favor of approving Appendix B, election forum procedure, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, we've got 5 ayes again. Jen, where are you on this?
I'm good with it.
Okay, well, that is the end of what we have for our draft document. And, we may have some comments coming in from residents because it isn't a public packet. And if so, I'll share those with everybody, or we'll let, if you get comments, we'll do a final vote on the overall packet total next time. But I think that we're really 90% of the way home here. And the last piece that's not here yet is the last piece on our agenda for tonight's meeting, which is the draft voter verification document that Jen took the lead on, which I thought she did a great job with. And it's almost, well, it's 9 o'clock now, so I want to round up by 9:15 if we can. But we can go longer if you need to. That document was so complicated, I had to read it 3 times till Jen cleaned it up. And I think that it is very sensible to be precise about this. Anything else? I mean, did people have comments about that voter roll verification document? Jen, what was your take on it?
Maybe I'll make a couple comments up front. I mean, originally we had, I thought, been more inclined to just do a complete rewrite. And as I got into the job, I decided that precision was probably better in the document, despite that it would not be, I mean, it really didn't get shortened. Because I just thought it would be better for residents to know exactly what we were doing and for us to spell it out in a very prescriptive way. Just really to enhance transparency and get away from, frankly, the idea that, we have an agenda. Let's make it very transparent. So I instead of really shortening it and kind of summarizing what we were going to do, I laid out some of I left the language in there, but tried to shorten it and make it clearer about how we would vote on removing a voter, for instance, how challenges would be handled, for instance. I did put some of the language kind of almost as a chapeau from Cliff Notes to just to kind of provide an outline up front about what we were doing. I also tried to spell out the role of the staff on the village, just for clarity and transparency's sake. So those were probably the biggest animating principles, if you will. And in certain cases, I changed some of the language about how the committee would work with the staff, as in various parts of the process, but always with the idea that the staff, weren't part of the decision-making process. They were basically helping the committee do its work when, in the instances where needed, mostly with, frankly, data, with helping us aggregating data. So that's what I'll probably say up front.
I think that's an excellent summary, and thank you for doing the work. That was a hard document to tackle. Other people have comments on the draft in front of us? Anyone else?
I think it's well done. I think it's well done.
It reads very, very nicely. So thank you, Jen.
Yay, team. This stuff is hard when you're down in the weeds. Elections really, the fairness of an election goes to the details. And Jen, this was a hard, all of this. I mean, all of you had really detailed documents to review, and I think I then just done a tremendous job. I thank you all, because this is now close to being done. I think what we do on the next steps on this document is, clean it up in final so that we have a clean overall draft based on what we approved on the main ordinance. And now this is Appendix A to the main ordinance. And I think it's awfully close to being done. The only other question I had reading this, again, going back to the idea of giving future committees a cookbook so that there's no ambiguity, no lack of transparency. It would be useful to me if I were on next year's committee, which I don't plan to be, by the way, but if I were, to sort of know what the decision rules were. Like, for example, very specific, if someone is on last year's voter roll, well, that's no guarantee they're still a resident this year. But if they were on the village office list this year and on the current county voter roll, if the county voter roll were accurate, so A plus B, they're on the village residence list, which is kept up to date by the staff, and they're on the county voter roll. Does that mean they're equals a qualified voter? That kind of decision rule, how you have just if A, then B equals C. And it occurred to me to try to do that. And to give it, I mean, we're probably going to need it. I hope we get a contractor to do this work, because it's a lot of work. But a contractor would probably need to have those decision rules spelled out in one page. Larry, you look thoughtful. What's your thought?
My thought is I was hoping that that's one of the things that the contractor would provide insight on. Hear what you're saying. Let's say that the role we have now, that there's been no outside audit looking at it and saying, well, you use the county voter role and then you use the assessment role and the McDonald's Happy Meal role. Okay. And so the question is, did you do a reasonable, because we know in every case, there can be a flaw in each of those roles. So
that's why you have to do a series of checks to cross-check each other. Yeah.
To a reasonable extent.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? There's no requirement here to be perfect.
And in
Okay,
fact, it's very hard to do a perfect voter roll.
okay,
These
I
are
mean, I know
750 people.
there's 5 million up for grabs there, but you see what I'm saying? The question is that type of thing. Well, this part of this audit, I was hoping would actually show us where we might improve on those situations.
Mhm,
Okay, rather than telling them what they are.
mhm. It would depend on the skill of whoever we can hire.
Yeah,
I mean, the RFP and the draft job specs that we approved earlier this evening, say that we need somebody who's good at doing, electronic annotated voter, spreadsheets. But if we got somebody who actually knew the voter roll maintenance regs from the state, for example, and ours, they would be able to say, here's how I would approach this job. I would check this, and then I would check this, and then I would check this in this sequence. I'd like to see that, somebody who's done voter roll verification would have an opinion
Right.
on that.
right.
If we only get like a graduate student or a paralegal who can do a really thorough, spreadsheet following instructions,
Mhm.
then we don't get that expertise. But we do have Boris, right?
Yeah,
The exec
That's
director of
right.
the county.
But on top of that, let's say you do get a paralegal or a grad student, right? At least you'll have gotten to a better status than you have now as to identifying whether what we're doing is right and do we have other options. And then if necessary, you can proceed in following years to improve on that, to
Mhm.
get. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's invaluable to get it, but I don't know that I would assign value to things at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I,
Other comments on that? Do we need to add anything like the yes, no decision rules or do these things in this sequence here? Jen, what do you think on that?
I think that I think that I'm wary of being much more prescriptive than we already are.
Okay.
Because I think we have to I think depending on who the voter is or the potential voter, of the menu of options that we have, some will be more fruitful than others. And I think we'll have a very hard time distilling it into one preferred set of steps, but maybe I'm not thinking about it thoroughly enough.
I think you thought about this very thoroughly, going through that document so thoroughly. That was great.
Um,
Right?
Marty,
Yes, John?
I have a question, Marty. Devil's advocate, suppose this paralegal, whoever we hire, falls flat on his ass and the work product is for naught. I mean, how much time will we have to get it right before the election?
I thought about that,
Good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll see in the specifications for the contractor, that one pager that I sent around on the weekend, and also in the RFP, the draft RFP, is that the contractor, whoever it is, whether it's a company, which I would love to have a company do this, because it's done this before, that would be the best of all worlds. But assuming we just get a paralegal, okay, we end up with that. I mean, we don't know who's going to respond to the bids, but it says in the RFP and in the overall specs I sent around on Sunday or Saturday, whatever, that the contractor must give us a biweekly written report with a copy of the document, the spreadsheet, at each stage. So we would know pretty quickly, I would think within the first two, reports, 2 weeks apart, whether this person was in fact being systematic and thorough and meticulous about checking things and was following procedures. I mean, I learned that as a young manager, that you have people do interim reports on a complex document. So that's built in to the contract. I mean, assuming that the council does approve this, which I certainly hope they do, that we would have the interim product to look at every 2-week interval. And if somebody screws it up, we're going to know that pretty soon, early in time for Plan B, which probably involves all of us doing it or getting the second bidder on the contract to step in, which I have done on some other jobs that I've done in my professional work, where the first bidder promised the moon and then didn't even deliver, couldn't even tie their shoes. out the door in a month and you get the second bidder in. I mean, Michael, that's something we'd obviously have to work with the village, with manager on. I'm assuming though that the first selection, whoever we pick, will be competent. Let us please assume that. Even if they don't have experience with voter roll verification, at least they'll be competent at complex spreadsheets. And we'll know that right away. I think we'll know that in the first interim report we see 2 weeks into the contract. So that's how I thought about that. That just comes from.
Sure. Well, who's going to oversee his work product on a weekly basis or biweekly basis? Is it the committee or Michael or
We are.
us?
We
Pardon
are.
me?
We have the
Committee.
expertise, the subject matter expertise to know whether they're doing it right.
Right.
Plus, we do not want to lay more work on Michael. You know,
Yeah.
one of the issues in the previous 2 years that caused all the election turmoil was that the staff was too involved in managing the election. I mean, the
Staff
the
was
charter is really
overloaded.
clear that the committee manages the election. So
Yeah.
Michael, you give us the data and we don't want to lay any more work on you. You know, I mean, truly, we don't want to tangle you in this. You know, it's partly to protect you from anybody casting aspersions on you. What do you have to say? What are you thinking?
I'll speak up for Michael. Thank you.
Michael, was that your thought? Don't lay more work on you? That was certainly our thought.
Well, Arthur, feel free to say what you want to say, but yeah, the only thing I noticed in your thing is it said bi-weekly. And that, you know, most contractors that's probably a lot of reporting. You might want to switch that to weekly. That was the only thing I was noticing in your RFP.
That we should do every week instead of every 2 weeks?
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought you were saying twice a week.
No,
they were
no,
reporting
every
to you
2 weeks.
twice. Every 2
Bi-weekly,
weeks.
every
Okay,
2 weeks.
got it. Got
Every
it.
2 weeks. And like I said, I think we'll know the first report when we look at the interim work product that someone's done in 2 weeks. Because, you know, people usually come into a project trying to do their best.
Right.
So we'll still have their best foot forward. We'll see if they are in fact being thorough and meticulous in their first work product. And if they're not, we'll be back to you for whoever the second bidder was.
Marty,
Yes,
um, so this isn't probably in the written document, right? But that first week, well, at any time in this process, this vendor is going to have access to the committee to better understand what he's doing.
right,
Is that right?
right. It says in the draft RFP that the successful bidder should expect to meet regularly or frequently or something as needed with the election committee. And it also says in the RFP that the election committee will supervise the work because it really is
Right.
our
Okay.
area and our expertise and our
Yeah.
job to supervise the work. It's not Michael's job to supervise voter
No,
verification.
no, it shouldn't. be today.
Did I answer your question? Do you have
Great.
another question, Larry?
Nope, that's
Paul?
great.
Michael? Okay. John?
No, I was just looking at Michael's face.
We're trying not to load work on you, Michael. We're trying to keep you from
He
getting
said, "Oh
better.
my God, more's coming."
No, Jen, what's your thought?
On where we are,
Mhm.
It's almost 9:15.
I know. Arthur, you got your hand up? We're going to wrap it. Arthur?
No, I don't have my hand up, but I wanted to second Jen's comment earlier that we really can't make any well-defined rules at this time. I mean, you might find, you know, you already noted that the county voter roll is faulty. They say somebody's not on the list and we just helped somebody moved in 2 weeks ago. You know, that's information. So I think use of total information here
Right.
is the way to go. And we can't make any rules in advance.
Right. All appropriate sources, all appropriate data sources. And the state regs do spell out a whole list of data sources that you can use to verify who's on and off a voter roll. And so, you know, all this information on the procedures, we have lots of stuff here. The main thing we wanted to do was make sure that Michael didn't end up with the workload.
Right. Michael is not your staff. That's the.
Exactly right. And that's Arthur, to go back to your original question, that's another reason we do need a designated part-time staffer for that 3-month period to really do this right. Katie, do you have any comments before we wrap up?
No, I noticed one thing on Appendix A in the proposal. I think we're missing Brookville Road addresses.
Thank you for catching that.
No.
We'll put
That's
that
a very
in.
old map that I inherited, that Appendix
Oh,
A.
okay.
So I'll make sure
Yeah.
that it didn't drop off on the second page somewhere.
Okay, thank you. for
Can't
fixing that.
forget Paul McGowan and the other
Yeah.
residents.
I
There's
wouldn't for a
There are
moment.
17
Road.
addresses on Brookville
That's
Road.
right.
Okay, so Michael
yeah.
will get a better map
And Marty,
a
I had
better
one
list.
more comment
Yeah.
there. You just said that all appropriate sources, that's to add people to the voter roll, all appropriate sources. But to remove people, there is a state
Yes,
regulations on that.
exactly.
So
And we
it's
keep
important to
that
be
in.
really clear about that because the county gives us their list that's out of date, but you can't just go and start removing people off that
No,
list.
no, you're
So,
required to document it. And Boris at the county, the county executive staff for the Board of Elections for the county said that the two main ways that you remove people from a voter roll have to be both in writing. One is to go, if somebody died, you check the vital statistics department, there'll be a death record. You can't just go to the newspaper obit, you have to go to the official death record. And that's easy to check. That takes like 3 minutes to find that. When I tried to check out some people, that took me 3 minutes. The other piece is the other way that you can remove somebody from the voter roll, according to Boris, is that you have a written statement from a family member that someone has died or moved away. There has to be something in writing. You have to have some basis. The committee can't just guess that, grandpa died. So I mean,
yeah, and so this is from my perspective. This is the actual problem with the voter roll process is that the county has like 850 people in Martin's Additions that are registered voters. So the process is not to capture everybody. We know who lives in the village. We have the list. It's not that it's not that hard. The problem is how do you get from the 850 that the county has down to the 700 and some
750 or
that
whatever.
we know we actually have.
Right.
That 100 people going through and verifying that those people no longer live there.
And you have to have
very
documentation that they don't live there. One other way that Boris said you could document is by going to the property records for the county, which are very easy. That's 2 seconds to access those. And you can see the property was sold. So if the Joneses own the house and now the Smiths own the house, boom, that's a verification off a government record. Again, and that's fine. So, but it's a process, you have to really, like you
and
say,
that's actually why the charter amendment makes this actually easier, because if there was a voter on our list who has an address that is different than that is not in the village, then you know that's somebody that's not living there. So then you can just compare it to property records. If they own the property, then you can ask them if they plan to return. But there's like 10 people that are that way.
Yeah. So again,
so that's not that hard.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Michael. And I think that we're going to try to not lay it on you this time, but any insight like that in terms of where you saw problems last year, I think we're very grateful for all that input. One last question for Katie before we wrap up. Katie, last time that the committee talked about running the draft by Ron for a sort of a preview check before we give it to the council in early December. Did you talk to Ron, or would you talk to Ron about whether he'd be willing to give us a quick review of this between now and our November 30th meeting?
Yes, no, I can talk to Ron. Yes.
Okay.
I'll run it by Ron.
And I think, John, you were the one who suggested that, and I thought it was a great idea. So with Katie's assistance, are we all agreed that we'll ask Ron to give us a quick look before we actually submit it to the council?
Okay. Oh, I think last month it was John. He was asking about I thought he was about the RFP running that, because I did talk to Ron about his other municipal clients and if anyone had ever done this sort of thing before. So I talked to him about that. I haven't talked to him about the other, but yeah, I can talk to Ron as long as that's okay, Arthur. And
right.
If I'm incorrect, please let me know.
And I don't know if you heard, but according to his experience, he's never seen this service before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, with all the lawsuits that have gone on about, people being purged from voter rolls and all that stuff that the Trumpies have done, you would think that there would be lots of companies out there verifying voter rolls independently, doing independent audits and all that. And I don't think there are that many, but it certainly seems to me like a market niche if anyone wanted a new career, which I personally don't. But anyway, with Katie,
an interesting point though that he did make was, he represents, I think, 10 municipal governments or something, but and though he hasn't seen it done locally, doesn't mean that it hasn't been, but his clients haven't done it, and it doesn't mean that it can't be. I think a lot of his clients still had the in-person elections, and so this is mail-in versus in-person. So he did raise that differential, that factor. So you know,
Yeah,
that
when we
they
had
don't do it, they
in-person,
never did such a deep scrub or deep dive of it because people came in person, so.
right.
he
And
had
the thing
mentioned
is, you know, he's right in the sense that when you're doing a universal mail vote election, the accuracy of the election roll becomes even more important because you're giving everybody a live ballot on that list. And, you know, when people came up to the election table back in the day, you know, between the 5 of us on the election committee, we just knew most of people, you know, it wasn't like people came up. And if somebody didn't, you know, wasn't on the roll, we sent them home. And one guy came back with his mortgage. He didn't have a driver's license showing margin additions. He'd moved in on May 1st. And he went home and got his mortgage. And the committee voted to accept his mortgage as evidence documentation that he was indeed now a resident. You know, I mean, that was an interesting case, but you can only do that live. You can't really do that if you've got a universal mail vote. It just, the accuracy of the voter roll becomes even more critical when you're doing a mail vote election. Okay, so thank you. If you would tell Ron, you know, that we would appreciate it if he'd take a look at this, that would be great. Arthur, do you have your hand up?
No, I'm just waiting for 9:15.
Well, we're
Oh,
almost
it's
there.
come and gone.
Hang on, we're 8 minutes past it. Shame on us.
Marty, one thing I want to do is I want to thank Larry for producing that government voter form. I thought that was very informative for me, you know, whether we need to know it or not. It was you that produced it, right, Larry?
Yeah, he came up
Okay.
with it. Good research there.
Yeah, well, what I really liked about it is that if you guys produce a form for somebody to sign, you know, if it became a very serious situation, it's, you know, so what? But for somebody to sign a federal document, and that's what that form is, it's a whole different ball of wax.
Mhm.
And it's maybe it's not as good as a notary, but it is a pretty strong thing to sign that, because
Mhm.
you're saying that you're signing a federal document saying you have a right to vote here.
Right.
And it's simple, and I thought it was fantastic.
It was a great find, and I appreciate that very much. Here, he's not even on the committee, and he's doing research on the voter stuff. Okay, Katie, we'll ask you to get back to us about when we can get this to Ron for legal review. And Arthur, thank you for being here through this meeting and raising your concerns. Katie, thank you always for your support. It's just terrific having you be our liaison. Everybody in the committee, you have done yeoman labor here. And this document is 99% done, and I am so grateful because this is now over the hump. We're over the hard part here, I think, with a clean document that I hope will stand for years, that nobody will have to ever go through this process, at least not in my lifetime. Anyway, any other final comments?
Good job. Excellent job.
I
Thank
will,
you.
I will clean up the formatting a little bit on this thing. And resend it to you in the next 2 days, Marty.
Excellent.
Or
And as
to
soon as,
everybody.
yeah, as
'Cause
soon as you
I
send it to
even
me,
see a
I'll send it to,
typo.
I'll send it to all
Yeah.
the council members, Arthur, following up on your questions, so that everybody will have it as part of the 4-document package preparing for our proposal on Wednesday, or on Thursday. So thank you, Jen, for diving back in. You must be sick of looking at that document at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, any other final closing comments? Larry, thank you for joining us and helping in this meeting. And I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
So moved. Yeah.
Okay, John seconded.
Okay, what's the official time?
9:25. We went over by 10 minutes, forgive me. Anyway, good
All right.
discussion tonight, folks. We really covered a lot.
That's not too bad.
And thank you all. All in favor